are talking about technological convergence and the question of, is it making everything dumber? I'm Mike Gravenberry. With me is Josh Hartman and Mike Shipsky. And let's just get into this by comparing the sort of trajectories of iOS and OS X. So let's sort of just, where do they start? And like, where do we see them going? And really, where are they now? Because they're much more similar.
They are.
The
whole point of the technological convergence, they continue incorporating iOS ideas into OS X, and they haven't. I mean, Apple doesn't really lay out its game plan for everyone, and it's hard to know what is their end goal, and that it's a concerning thought.
Well, this is kind of why I use the word trajectory, because
trajectory. I mean,
you might not know where they're going, but you can kind of see. I mean, like every time we get an iteration of either OS, it's like there's more and more that's similar.
But here, the trajectory is worrying because it at which point does it stop? Because how long can it keep going before they are the same thing? And if they are the same thing, then that basically means that desktop and laptop computers don't exist anymore.
Essentially, because when you have iOS, it's like you have to have it on a highly mobile device, something you can slip into your pocket. And, I mean, you just can't... Like, even if there was a way for them to get the amount of power you have in a desktop into a phone, which in the future, I think totally, why not? It's probably going to happen. But even if that's technologically possible with the hardware, there are certain limitations on the sort of work you do on a desktop versus the work you would do on a phone, or the things you would do on a phone.
It's a question of stuttering. It's a question that has nothing to do with technological ability. Of course, we can theoretically make any kind of computer we want, and given enough practice, we can make it any size and any level of mobility that we so desire and plan. But it's just a basic logical functioning of things that desktops and phones and laptops are not the same thing.
Right, they're separate because they're specialized for a certain task. And I think there's some, Mike Shipsky, there's some economics to be brought in here as well. Just speaking of specialization and what's the opportunity cost of making a desktop do cell phone functions and a cell phone do laptop functions and stuff like that. That was just me throwing out. I'm not actually asking that question.
Okay, good, because I have no answer.
Yeah, good.
But that is essentially where we're going to here, because we do have these separate devices for a reason, and the trajectory seems clear that iOS and OS X are becoming more and more similar as time goes by, but they can't actually meet. It seems like a paradox, because if they were to actually meet, it would mean that it would be not functional on one of those two devices. If we assume that there is still a desktop operating system and a mobile operating system, and if they are largely the same operating system, Apple has, as far as I can see and predict, violated one of their central tenets of how they design things, because they've created a product, one of which has to be completely superfluous and unnecessary. Because if you don't specialize, and that's what the point I'm getting at, is the loss of specialization. We have them as separate products because they are specialized separate products. Each of them has qualities that the other does not, that makes them useful in different contexts.
By the inherent sort of pros and cons of their hardware limitations and abilities.
Right. I mean, having a full-fledged keyboard is less mobile. But when you're really typing, you need a full-fledged keyboard if you're going to do things. The pointer, as much as everyone wants to touch everything, the pointer still has such an unbelievably huge role to play, because the pointer is a million miles more precise than a finger can ever be. The more you talk about creative professionals, as Apple seems to have its lifeblood in engineers and creative professionals, you can't design bridges with your finger. I mean, then you can get into styluses, I suppose, all manner of other devices and pencils and drawing on the screen.
But Steve Jobs himself, not again that means anything anymore, but Steve Jobs himself said, why would you ever put a stylus with anything? You have 10 of them on your hands.
Right. The only reason you need a stylus is if you're actually
trading
the
technology
screen for a piece of
enough.
paper.
Yeah.
But yeah, or if we have any creative professionals listening to this podcast, graphic design artists and 3D animators and modelers, you can't extrude polygons with your fingers. And well, I'm sure you can, but what kind of precision can you get with that? How do you the whole world of digital art,
not to mention trying to do that on a screen the size of an iPhone.
that
simply wouldn't be possible.
That's also the big thing.
Are we going to just have like 27-inch touchpad lap devices?
We walk around like this.
But I think we're taking it. We are kind of taking it to
right.
An
this
extreme.
is like a hyperbolic extreme.
Right, of course. But I think the direction that things are going, you kind of have to ask that question: when will it stop? When is enough enough? And when can you sort of like put on the brakes and go, okay, we've gone too far. We have an app store. We've designed a new Final Cut that feels like a free consumer product. It feels underpowered and nonsensical. And, like things that are user-friendly to the point of, to a fault, user-friendly to a fault, because people who actually have skills in doing things and actually know what they're doing with software can't use them because the options don't exist. It's trying to do everything for you.
Yeah, you cannot have something that is... It's really hard to design something that's both capable of very complex operations and simple to use. That's a hard thing to do. And really good software is capable of finding a nice middle ground with presenting complex things in a really simple and easy to understand manner. But there is a point where it has become very trendy, and Apple has... I don't know if Apple has spearheaded, or at least...
Oh, they've spearheaded.
Really adopted the just taking out things that the average person doesn't need. And in most cases, for any given person, this is helpful and beneficial because it's really the only person you're hurting here is the specialist. But they haven't gone so...
exist for a reason.
Specialists do exist for a reason, and they haven't gone so far just yet as to really lose the specialist. The specialists still have with the exception of Final Cut, by and large, specialists still have the ability to use these programs. But my fear that I think I'm trying to present here is, when does the trend overtake the common sense? Because in the world of technology, I think we've seen far too many times trends overtaking common sense. When you think, no, this will be good, this is what we should do, and you've got investors behind you saying, no, this is what sells, we have to do this now, only to find out after the fact that you've broken the thing that would have sustained you.
Right,
and
exactly.
I mean, creative professionals, like I said, creative professionals in Apple have had a very, very, very long relationship. People using Photoshop and doing cover arts for things have been using Macs through all the dark ages.
Yes, through the dark ages.
Through the dark ages of Apple. They were there, and changing nothing, they would probably still remain to be there. But what happens when... are people going to follow in order to fit in line with OS X? Apple certainly has a lot of influence. Is Photoshop going to come out with a new version of Photoshop that all of a sudden has all of its features stripped out of it? They make a version like this that is cheaper and marketed to smaller people, but they had iMovie and Final Cut, and they decided those needed to be one... those needed to fuse together into something that was simple and easy to use. Is there a danger that this trend is going to spill over into other things? Like, my logical brain says no. If there's a market for it, someone will still make it. And I guess that's still true, but is it going to be driven away from the nice centralized hub that we have now? Are people in the future who depend on taking their MacBook Pros everywhere with them to do their photography and their digital editing,
are they
going to be reduced to being Linux users and making all of their own things? Not that that's a bad thing to be a Linux user. There's a lot of great stuff in having that customizability, but are we all going to have to become that because Apple is pushing us out?
That is, I think, a good segue into, and I think Mike Shipsky can help with this as well. And if you want to swing back around to any of the economic stuff that I brought up, you can. But, is this trend present, or is it less present in like the Android operating system and all of its variations? Linux, any other open source stuff? Do you think you see that happening?
Android stuff, because Android doesn't really have a desktop
It's true.
Well, they have the Chromebook, but I haven't messed around with the Chromebook at all. I don't know what the actual layout is. But we can assume it's not the kind of laptop we're talking about. It's not the MacBook Pro. It's not your typical.
No, I mean, I think if anything, what I know of the
workbook.
Chromebook, it's the ultimate version of this idea.
It
is a YouTube and Netflix machine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's not out of the case. But Linux is interesting because I don't know. I just installed Linux onto my MacBook Air, and I really like it. It's your traditional desktop setup. There's no frills about it. There's no trickery. There's no
There's no deception.
I wouldn't call what Apple is doing deception.
Subterfuge.
I wouldn't call what Apple's doing deception, because I still really like the stuff that they're doing to OS 10. Most of it, I like what they're doing to OS 10. But yeah, Linux is just like stripped down, bare bones, what you need desktop. But you can still do the minutia. You can get into the minutia, and you can do really complex things with Linux. So I don't know. Like, in terms of if people are pushed out of Apple, will they move towards Linux? Maybe. I mean, you can always install Linux for free on any device you have. It's not that hard. I did it for my MacBook. I thought it'd be a nightmare, but in fact, it wasn't. It wasn't too hard. But I don't know. Like, will that actually make people just go to? I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it's just the sort of fear that I have, and I think it's shared, and I think there are good reasons for it.
I also think that I don't know exactly the applications. Like, just name an application I use that a lot of creative people use in Apple, like just OS 10.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's kind of, I think the Final Cut 10 is like, that is like the prime example of something that has had, with that iteration, it has had such a dramatic stripping back of features, and it's just completely reworked the way you use the program so much that it becomes non-functional for anyone who is skilled in
so it's basically people who really got into it. Like, are you saying like you can't do some of the things you used to be able to do, or is it just
basically, or it's so difficult to do the same thing, and the workflow is so much different and strange and convoluted. In the name of simplicity and ease of use, that it becomes harder to use.
This is my
problem. But it's not harder because it's more powerful, and I think that's the problem. It isn't harder because it's a skill you have to learn. It's harder because they sort of arbitrarily changed it around in the name of simplicity. This
is like my chief concern with Apple. It's always been my chief concern with Apple. Like, if you want to do the stuff that Apple is really good at doing, you have absolutely zero problem. It's always going to work. It's always going to do what you want to do. But if you want to go off the beaten path and like personalize your computer in a different way, or do anything that's like technologically complex, it's really, really hard. And I think even stuff like Windows 8, we should say that Windows 8 now has a really mobile look to it.
Yeah, they've added that in time, and you can still switch back at will to traditional. But I mean, clearly they're following the trend. They want to move into this.
And most of the laptops now for Windows have a touch screen, right? Like, because it's clearly it's clearly.
And again, I think this is why the Surface sucks so much. Is that it is basically this nightmare machine that we hypothesized.
It is the nightmare machine which we have hypothesized.
I mean, it has the touchscreen. It has the quote not required keyboard, but let's be honest, you need the keyboard, and it has that touch interface, which is essentially Windows 8, right? But you have the same sort of operating system running on desktop computers and running on Windows phones, and it all looks the same, and it all acts the same.
So what's the point of buying a phone versus buying a computer? Is there any specialization left, or are they all equally bad at doing everything?
Right. You've sort of spread out. You've taken away the good things that each one does because of its natural abilities, and you've sort of leveled it out and just taken the average of everything, which tends to suck balls. I mean, it's like, and that's not good. You don't want something that's just sort of mediocre all around. You want something that's really good.
Just to tie this back to games, because this is a gaming website. I forgot myself for just a second.
This was the website where we talked about our nightmare machines, which we have hypothesized.
All we do is talk about Microsoft.
This episode of the A2Pcast brought to you by Nightmare Machines. Buy yours today.
But thinking about games, like mobile games versus core games, and how, I don't know, like with the emergence of tablets, you can do more complex games. But like if you really want to get down into core games like RPGs, like first-person shooters, you can't do that stuff on a tablet. Just like you can't do Final Cut 10. Is that? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot the application already. But you can't do complex Final Cut 10 stuff on a tablet.
Yeah, that would be incredibly difficult.
Right.
Some of the features might be interesting. That's like, I think like things like iMovie on a tablet could be really cool. Like really, really bare bones. Like here's a clip, you pull it over, drop it into the timeline. Cut here with your finger.
Fairly certain it exists.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's probably, why it exists. Because, like, the basic functionality, pick up a filter, throw it on the thing. Like, that really easy stuff, that's fine. That could probably work on a tablet. But, like, if you need to do all of the complex stuff that was present in earlier versions of Final Cut, you're not going to be able to do that on a touch surface. And you're not going to be able to do that in the new version of Final Cut, or if you can't do it nearly as easily.
Yeah, actually, I just thought of a really great idea to kind of Homer ham the point. Hammer home the point. In video editing, it's really easy when you're making your family video. Yes, okay, this one, filter, title, credits, okay, done, because you need credits for all the members of your family. But when you're working at a professional level, the frames matter. Thinking of, not that they had Final Cut when they made Star Wars, but the original Star Wars, when they had so many problems filming, they were literally using things up to the last possible frame before a boom mic came into the shot.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with a finger. But like, if you are working at that level of detail, frame by frame, millisecond by millisecond, to get these shots that lined up, try doing that with a finger, and I'd rather cut off my fingers. I'd rather just
get rid of them.
Homer ham my fingers away.
That's right. Well, you mentioned RPGs on a tablet. They have KOTOR for iPad.
They do, yeah.
They do.
I want to try it, actually.
They also have GTA 3.
Yeah, I've played that. That's kind of difficult to play.
It is kind of difficult.
Yeah.
I have tried to play, like, even first-person shooters. What's the Nova? Is it Nova for iOS?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think I tried to play Nova. I didn't like it. It was like just so cumbersome. Like, first of all, like you're moving around like this. Your screen, your thumbs are like taking up half the screen anyway.
This is a problem with touchscreens when you need to see things and also control things.
Yeah, and then the fact that RPGs typically have a lot of menus, a lot of like stuff. Just imagine trying to play Skyrim with like pause, map, items. Different items.
It would be really difficult. In
just be a mess.
Though, honestly, I'm actually sort of intrigued to play KOTOR on an iPad because I think there might be some awkwardness, but I think a lot of it, particularly because of the combat system, because it pauses automatically, because you have, it's turn-based, you can select the different things and then go boop, and you play it, and it does the combat for you.
And you can do a point-and-click, like, navigation. You can say, click, and your character walks that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or even in combat, like, you say you pause, and then you click this enemy, you click your character, and then this enemy, and then you
flurry.
You cycle through the attacks, flurry, go do it, and then that can work. That can definitely work. And then there's a lot of really good point-and-click games for mobile devices that I've played that are really good. But yeah, like still first-person shooters. How do you do a first-person shooter on a tablet?
Everyone I've played has really sort of.
I just don't know.
Flat.
I don't know.
And I think, as Josh just said, it's really important to. the not being able to see things because your thumbs are in the way, but you have to control things with your thumbs. And I mean, especially if you're playing something like that on an iPhone, I mean, like that's like a third of the screen just completely gone by thumbs.
Like, I hate it when they have little virtual D-pad here, because like a tablet game should take advantage of the fact that you have this gigantic screen that you could manipulate. And instead, you're just relegated to this tiny little virtual D-pad here and this, and you have to swipe this way to make your character look this way or that way or whatever. It's so counterintuitive.
And I think it's kind of telling that the most successful mobile games are games that do not require you to move your character around so much.
Yeah.
Angry Birds and Infinity Blade come to mind.
So just to set another trajectory, if this indeed is the way that we're going, tablets, laptops, phones, there is going to be no distinction between any of them anymore. Will first-person shooters still be around in, say, 30 years when you physically can't do anything?
That's an interesting idea. Will
first-person shooters.
Will genres go out of style
because they're not possible?
Because they don't work. They don't work as well on the favored medium.
I'm going to say no, because first of all, I don't think that I don't personally believe that the future is actually that bleak.
Okay.
I'd
like to think so.
I don't think that the service
optimist over
or
here. Get away from me.
or
I don't want to catch your happy.
or phablets, as they're calling them, which sounds dirtier than I think they are.
They look hideous.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're dirty in that regard. But yeah, phablets, phones that are essentially small tablets. I don't think those are actually the future. I think we will retain some specialization in different things, and maybe they'll be mediocre in a lot of things, but I mean, essentially, a phone must be a phone, and you might have the option to do really hardcore work on a phone if you absolutely can't get to a desktop to do it. And we might have more cloud integration. I think cloud integration could bring a lot of really good things. So if you have a file just sitting on your desktop, you don't have to take a USB stick and go home to get the file.
This is one of the things.
If you get on a train and you forget the file that you're supposed to bring to class or work or whatever, you just look at it from your phone because it's there. And
it's always right there. And I think Apple is kind of getting at that with now making iWork, Pages, Numbers, and Keynote free with every new Mac and every new phone to make sure that every user has it. And so many campuses are doing mobile printing. You can print at your university from your phone, and if you forgot your file, you didn't have to because you saved it on the cloud. Type your paper up at night, go to class, stop by the library, hit print from your phone, from your cloud file on the program that Apple gave you for free, and on you go. That, positive side. I'm being infected by the optimism, positive sides of technological convergence.
There we go. I mean, I think but I wouldn't call that convergence, I think I would call that sort of cooperation.
Yeah, cooperation.
Technical cooperation. Your specialized devices cooperating with each other. That's a good thing. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. And I think we have to give credit where it's due. Google Drive is... I love it. I love Google Drive.
It's a godsend.
A2Play runs exclusively on Google Drive.
It does. This is the
Google,
endorsement.
you may send us the money. Yingling and Google, we're waiting for our checks.
Yingling and Google, yes. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of the A2Pcast. You can find links to stuff that we've talked about on the info page of the thing we're doing. Podcast.
Yay!
That's what we're doing. A2Pcast.
That's what I just spent the last 25 minutes doing. I was wondering what I was doing here.
You're talking?
Talking in this room.
I thought I was in a
How did I get here? What am I doing here?
Weird. Yep. We're on Twitter at Alive2Play. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Alive2Play. I'm Mike Raffenberry for Mike Shipsky and Josh Hartman. We'll talk to you guys next time.